Good afternoon. Today we are joined by Alexander Edwards. He is the president of Strategic Vision. Alexander, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Our pleasure. Why don't we start with telling us what exactly is it that Strategic Vision does?
Well, Strategic Vision is an international market research consulting firm, really focusing in on advisory services to help people understand who consumers are and how and why they make decisions.
Terrific. And one of the things that makes Strategic Vision unique is the Edwards 7-point commitment scale, whereby customers measure how much they love a product. How is that different than a traditional satisfaction or likelihood to recommend scale?
Well, the way that most people go about asking questions on how much did you like this experience, how much do you like this product or service, they'll use a satisfaction scale that says either from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or smiley face to frowny face. They're asking, how did this go? And what we've discovered is that the difference between a very satisfied 5 and a satisfied 4 or whatever that scale might be, it doesn't follow the natural language of the way consumers like to express themselves, nor is it predictive in sales, advocacy, loyalty, retention, etc. Instead, if we ask customers how they relate to and what their experiences are with products, services, and other goods out there, they will talk about how much they love something, how much they hate it, where certain products will fail, or what was excellent. Sometimes they'll also say they were very satisfied by certain parts. And what we've discovered is that those who say that they love a various aspect of their experience, they are more likely to buy it again, to advocate that product, etc. If they were to say, I hate it, or it failed me, they're more likely to tell their friends to avoid a product or service. They're more likely to create a Facebook account and say, don't do this, whatever you might do. What we've also discovered is that when people say that they're satisfied or even very satisfied, whether we're talking automotive, we're talking travel, we're talking which doctor to use, if they're very satisfied, their behavior looks more like the haters than it does the people who love them. And the reason why it looks more like the haters is that when you're very satisfied with something, you're effectively saying, yes, you completed the contract, but there was nothing beyond that. There was nothing emotionally that was tying me to what's going on here. So when you have someone who's able to say, for example, we'll take this for an example. You go to your significant other on a Valentine's Day and you say, hey, I am very satisfied with your performance. You know, thank you, very satisfied. That typically creates arguments and people sleeping on couches. If you were to say, I love you, thank you so much for this past year, you have a completely different reaction.
Right.
Same thing with your vehicle. I am very satisfied with my $120,000 Tesla. People don't talk that way. They will tell you what they love about it. And with that scale, because of how powerful it is in predicting advocacy, loyalty, retention, conquest, that's why we are used in so many different qualitative and quantitative studies, is because it really has significant predictive power in where people are going to go in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about Strategic Vision's biggest project, the New Vehicle Experience Study, or NVES. What exactly is it?
The New Vehicle Experience Study is an ongoing annual study of about 250,000 new vehicle buyers. We cover everything from who the customer is and how did they go about purchasing their vehicle and what that experiences was. Effectively following the entire customer journey, starting with the customer. Everything from what triggered them to buy a vehicle, what were they interested in when they were shopping, what caused them to consider that initial vehicle, all the way down to they're at the dealership to purchase and the experience beyond. And what we mainly focus on is how do we convert people at various steps of the purchase path. For example, we know that when people think, I've got to buy a vehicle, their next thought is, well, what's exciting out there? And there are a number of brands that might really excite them, but to convert that excitement into actual consideration, we connect it to the emotionality of trust or security. And we help the automotive manufacturers understand what are the various things that they can do to reinforce security so that they can make it along that next step of the customer journey.
That's fascinating. So can you give us an example from that data set of an aha moment when one of your customers, while digging around the data set, what's something that they found and what's a change and that they implemented at their brand as a result of that finding, and what impact did it have on the customer?
Well, there was one part supplier that was using the data, and as they were going through it, they discovered that there were married couples that were in a certain class of vehicle, and when they received a specific feature of tilt steering, they were able to go, wow, those who love this actually were more likely to advocate and were coming back to the product. And they were saying, what is it about this class of vehicle, what is it about tilt steering that made people say this is so great? Where you can actually have it change in memory. Well, what they discovered was you had married couples using the same minivan, and when the different partner was able to get into that vehicle, they got in, put the kids in the back, it worked for them. Next person got in, worked for them. They shared those results with one of the automotive manufacturers, and they said, we may as well make this standard in all of our vehicles because they love it so much. They're telling others to get this minivan rather than these competitive minivans. And so they made quite a bit of money on that, being able to say, we're now going to make tilt steering, automatic tilt steering standard across the board.
And helping with marital bliss and making sure there's no fights in the household.
And making sure marital bliss is also there as well, so they can love each other rather than be tolerant or satisfied with each other.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
So you spend a lot of time in the auto industry. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing the global automotive OEMs today?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that there's so much anecdotal and wrong thinking. For example, the number of times I will watch a commercial on in order to sell a vehicle, and they're talking about MPG. It's every single time, it's MPG, MPG. This is why you're going to buy this vehicle, and yet it has almost no impact whatsoever in the way customers are buying vehicles. If everybody wanted to have MPG as their main purpose, they would all go out and buy used Geo Metros. Great MPG and very cheap, $2,000-3,000. You can have a vehicle for 60 miles per gallon. We hear people talking about the future of electrification, automation, shared mobility. And instead what we see are companies that are burning through a lot of investor cash, and we have automotive manufacturers that are thinking, oh, I've got a great idea, this is great technology, it's in the news, this is what consumers want, and they're not actually being able to plan for the future of what customers are actually demanding.
And what are customers actually demanding?
A vehicle that will, first and foremost, get them safely and reliably from point A to point B. That's the first thing. You have to make sure they get that secure, reliable experience. After that, they have secondary priorities, and that can be, when I make that reliable trip, I either want to look good while driving. I want it to be the brand name. I want it to be the style of the vehicle. I want it to be the interior appointments that make it look good, or it's comfort. I don't want to think that I'm 50, 60, 70 years old when I get into this vehicle. I want it to be comfortable. I want my rear to be comfortable. I want the environment to be comfortable. Or maybe it's performance. It could be, I want my vehicle to respond to either make me feel like I'm Batman driving this vehicle, or respond so that it actually adds some active safety to it. Whatever that secondary priority is, it is what is crucial. Then you get to your tertiary, which for most people then starts to get to be price, or it gets to be MPG. In other words, all things being equal for their choices on those first and secondary priorities. Once those are met, then I can take a look at these other things. And OEMs seem to miss that. You can take a look at what has made Tesla create so much buzz in the with very wealthy consumers. It's because they're selling a sports car with an innovative powertrain with some very strong low-end torque. They're not selling an electric alternative powertrain vehicle that happens to be sporty. It could be the same car, but the way you position it, the way you talk about it, needs to be so different so it matches consumer priorities. That's what gets the sale. Whenever anyone gets into a vehicle like a Leaf or a Bolt, and they experience that electric powertrain, especially at the lower speeds and the acceleration, they're just as much in love as those customers that get into a Tesla.
Oh, that's fascinating. So let's say you had 30 seconds with the CEO of a major global automotive OEM brand and not Tesla, what would you say to them?
Forget everything that you've been doing with trying to be able to sell vehicles the way that you've been doing. You really want to understand what are the key attributes in the segments that you're selling that will create loyalty, specifically what will generate love. We are discovering that in the immediate future, at least the next 1, 2, and 3 years, one of the most instrumental ways that they can increase love with customers that actually has an impact on perceived quality and overall ownership experience is the sales process as well as the dealership experience. Right now, all the vehicles out there are all high-quality vehicles. Doesn't matter what brand name you are, all the brands out there are delivering high-quality vehicles. When it comes to the features, you can find features in mass market low-end vehicles that are identical in some of the upper-end vehicles as well. So instead, it really is what is that experience. And so the dealers who understand how to really put the customer first during the sales and service process, they're the ones that are going to find a lot of success for very little movement in the next couple of years.
So to finish off, let's talk about strategic vision. What are your visions for growth and priorities to grow the business in the next 5 years?
Well, we are focusing on a number of other studies right now. We are working with cities across America in a mobility study to really understand how customers are getting from point A to point B, whether it's biking, walking, plane, train, etc. So really enhancing that area. Furthermore, the new vehicle experience study is going international. We're already doing things lightly in other countries, and we've got a number of folks that have specifically challenged us in the next year or two to be able to have the exact same survey in those other areas, and we've been doing that with our international personal mobility study. Furthermore, we've also, even though we are heavily in the automotive area, we also do quite a bit of work in healthcare, travel, pharmaceuticals, and also the political arena, all of which we're increasing a lot of our both proprietary studies as well as syndicated studies as well in those areas, everything from medical to political.
Terrific. Well, we wish you the best of luck in your growth aspirations. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure.